The tundra stretched in endless silence, a graveyard of frost where even time froze between heartbeats. A Soviet convoy crawled across the white expanse under a dying sun, engines choking on cold air. The radio static whispered like a ghost through the command truck, then broke with a pulse. An unnatural frequency from beneath the permafrost. Men exchanged looks, fear hidden behind discipline. Orders came through in clipped Russian, proceed to coordinates. As night fell, the aurora shimmered like blood across the horizon. Beneath 20 meters of ice, the echo of something ancient trembled, waiting. The soldiers believed they were answering a signal from a lost aircraft. They were wrong. What they would uncover in that frozen valley would never reach the history books. Buried by their own government for half a century, the fissure became a doorway into the earth, and discipline melted into superstition. They descended with ropes and flares, faces ghost-lit by orange flame, the air thick with frost and stat. What they found was not a wreckage but a vault, its walls carved by tools beyond human age. Inside, something vast lay encased in translucent ice, a humanoid figure the size of a tank, its skin pale as marble, muscles coiled like ancient machinery. The ice hummed, alive with trapped current. A faint smile rested on the frozen giant's lips. They thought it was a corpse. They were wrong. It had been listening. The generator cables hissed as they connected the portable heater arrays to melt a section of the ice. When power surged, the vault pulsed like a heartbeat. The ice cracked, webbing with fractures that spread across the floor. The soldiers stepped back, weapons raised. Then the eyes opened, pale, pupilless, reflecting the flare light. Irina screamed something that was lost in the roar. For a second, the air seemed to reverse direction, like the world inhaled. The next moment, every light died. At dawn, only the echo of the storm remained. Headquarters received fragments of radio distress before the signal cut forever. 3 days later, a recovery detachment found no survivors, only the empty vault, scorched snow, and twisted steel. Moscow issued a blanket classification. Operation Null. Every file, every photograph, erased. The report's final line read, subject unaccounted for. But beneath the permafrost, far from any signal, something began to move again. In 2007, deep in a Moscow archive, a sealed crate was logged under biological research, restricted. Inside lay the real footage of the expedition. Film spliced, degraded, silent. The analyst who viewed it filed no report. Weeks later, he disappeared. The footage was never officially cataloged. Those who glimpsed a frame spoke of a figure behind the camera's reflection, not among the crew. The Soviet Union had fallen, but its ghosts still breathed, whispering through the ice of history. The truth waited, buried in celluloid. They called it Recovery, Division 12. But the men knew they were grave diggers for the impossible. Weeks after the first expedition vanished, new orders came from Moscow. Secure all remains, recover the object, and erase any trace of the prior mission. The operation unfolded in absolute secrecy under the endless gray of the Siberian dusk. Helicopters beat the frozen air, and armored transports carved through blizzards to reach the coordinates that no longer appeared on maps. Beneath the permafrost, engineers unearthed fragments of warped steel, and in the center, a vast cavity lined with crystalline frost. Something had crawled out. A single heartbeat registered on the seismic monitor, miles from the dig. Command ordered containment, not comprehension. They found it 2 days later, half buried beneath the snow, miles from the crater. Not the giant itself, but a remnant of what it had touched. A soldier's body, flash frozen mid-motion, veins black with frostbite. His heart was crystallized, still intact, beating faintly under infrared scan. Irina watched through the observation window, her reflection superimposed over the corpse. The instruments failed to register temperature or origin. The ice around the man emitted faint radiation, as though storing something alive. Kirov ordered the body sealed in a lead chamber for transport. That night, they heard knocking inside it 3 times. Slow, deliberate. When the lead vault was sealed, the air itself changed. The temperature rose 5 degrees despite the blizzard outside. Frost melted on instruments, then refroze instantly. The generators screamed, flickering with a rhythm that matched a pulse inside the chamber. Irina refused to leave. She claimed she heard a voice, not through sound, but through vibration in her bones. She whispered to Kirov that the body was no longer human, that it carried something older. The commander dismissed it as fatigue, but the sound grew louder. The ice on the vault's surface rising and falling like lungs inhaling. A coded transmission arrived at midnight, signed by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. All materials were to be relocated to a classified research facility outside Omsk. The official reason: anomalous biological specimen. The unofficial order: erase witnesses. Irina was listed for transfer. Kirov was not. He understood what that meant. In silence, he burned the mission reports inside his tent, the flames reflecting in his weary eyes. The wind outside carried the faint echo of chains dragging through ice. Somewhere, deep in the crater, the heartbeat stopped. They loaded the container under moonlight, sealed with red wax and iron bolts. The transport train moved through the endless taiga, its wheels echoing across frozen valleys. Inside, the vault hummed faintly, frost crawling outward from its seams. Irina sat alone in the cargo bay, notebook on her knees, sketching symbols she claimed to have seen beneath the ice. Outside, wolves followed in the dark, eyes catching the train's glow. At dawn, the conductor swore the vault was breathing. By dusk, they were no longer alone on the tracks. The train reached Omsk under a pale dawn, its wheels grinding to silence at a siding unmarked on any map. The facility rose from the snow like a scar, concrete domes surrounded by radio masts, guarded by men who never spoke their names. The cargo vault was lowered into a subterranean hangar, its frost shimmering under arc lights. Scientists in gray coats observed from behind reinforced glass, their faces drawn with sleepless fascination. Irina signed her transfer papers with shaking hands. Somewhere beyond the blast doors, technicians connected the vault to cables that would drain its cold like blood. Moscow had renamed the find Subject 9. No one asked what happened to Subjects 1 through 8. The order was simple: reactivate biological function and record data. In a chamber lined with condensation, Irina watched through safety glass as engineers wired the vault with thermic conductors and radiation sensors. The cables pulsed faintly, alive with static. On the monitors, internal heat signatures formed complex, fractal patterns, geometries not of nature, but of design. "It's a mechanism," Irina whispered. "Not a body." Her superior, Professor Yeligin, smiled without warmth and increased the voltage. The chamber lights dimmed as something inside the vault shifted, slowly, with purpose. Instruments registered no heartbeat, yet the waveform resembled breath. At 300 hours, the static returned. Not from the vault, but from every radio within the facility. The same pulse that had lured the first convoy in the tundra now resonated through the walls. It carried a pattern: 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, repeating endlessly. Irina realized it wasn't random, it was response. When she adjusted the frequency, the waveform changed, imitating her own adjustments like an echo learning speech. The technicians froze. "It's communicating," she said, barely audible. Then the lights went out, and from within the vault came a faint metallic exhalation. Neither air nor steam, but the sound of something remembering how to move. They thawed a section of the specimen to examine the organic tissue within. What emerged beneath microscopes defied classification. Fibers like muscle, but crystalline in structure, refracting light into coded patterns. When exposed to oxygen, the tissue rearranged itself, aligning along magnetic vectors. Irina noticed the same geometry mirrored in the electrical schematics of the Soviet radar systems displayed on nearby blueprints. "It's mapping us," she said. Yelagin dismissed her claim, insisting it was coincidence. Yet that night, when the facility's main antenna, array, rotated without power input, even he stopped smiling. By the week's end, the vault was opened entirely. Inside lay the remnants of a form neither machine nor organism, a lattice of bones fused with circuitry, veins of metal branching like roots. At its core was a sphere of translucent alloy that pulsed in sequence with the original signal. Irina approached, unable to resist. When she touched the surface, every monitor in the room displayed her own heartbeat. The signal stopped. Then a new one began. Softer, slower, human. The object mirrored her pulse exactly. "It's alive," she whispered. "Or it's learning to be." Weeks of data poured from the artifact like a new language no one could translate. Oscilloscope waves repeated across every instrument, forming perfect symmetry, as if the thing remembered patterns from human technology. The Kremlin demanded results. In a bunker below Omsk, Irina and Colonel Kirov were summoned to present findings to the Scientific Military Council. Charts lined the walls, but each told the same lie, that they were in control. Irina tried to explain that the device was recording them, not the other way around. Her words met silence. The chairman's order was final: reverse engineer its core and integrate it into defense research. Knowledge had become ammunition, and Omsk was the new front line. The artifact's core emitted controlled electromagnetic bursts when stimulated with current. Technicians called them memory flashes. Irina believed they were data, visual records of somewhere or something, far older than human industry. Engineers from Leningrad's radar division arrived with portable reactors and orders to extract energy signatures. Each attempt ended in short circuit and static shock strong enough to black out sections of the grid. Kirov kept the men working double shifts, pretending control while fear ate the silence between commands. The machine wasn't resisting. It was teaching. During a calibration test, a light burst filled the chamber. For 3 seconds, every monitor displayed the same vision: an aerial map of the Siberian plateau drawn in luminous threads. Irina saw coordinates she had never visited, marked by a pulsing red point. When the glare faded, the technicians swore they heard a human voice speaking perfect Russian, though the tape captured only static. The command center went silent. Kirov ordered radio silence and locked the tapes. But that night, Irina dreamed of snow opening like a wound, and inside it, machines buried like bones. 3 men from Moscow arrived without insignia. Their briefcases carried new directives: transfer all materials to a facility near Arzamas 16, classified under the Strategic Sciences Bureau. The artifact was now deemed biomechanical intelligence property. Kirov objected. His objections were noted, then ignored. Irina watched soldiers pack years of research into crates stamped only with numbers. When the convoy departed, she slipped one data reel into her coat. Somewhere deep inside, she knew the coordinates from her vision matched a second site, another fragment of the same technology, still frozen beneath the tundra. As the last truck vanished into the storm, Irina remained alone in the silent corridor of Sector 7. The power hummed faintly, an echo that matched her pulse. She opened the stolen reel and stared at the frozen frames. Geometric symbols overlaying a satellite photograph of northern ice fields. In the corner, a time code counted backward. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just remembering. It was counting down. Irina packed the reel, stepped into the snow, and disappeared from every record the state would ever keep. 50 years later, the Omsk files were declassified, at least the parts that survived. In a Moscow records center lined with steel shelves and flickering fluorescent bulbs, Historian Elena Morozova found a file marked Volkov. IM sealed, since 1958. Inside were blurred photographs, waveform graphs, and a handwritten map with coordinates leading north into the tundra. Every reference to the artifact was blacked out. Yet one reel of 16-meter film had escaped the sensors. Elena threaded it through an old projector, watching soldiers in parkas disappear into snow. On the final frame stood Irina, staring directly at the camera, alive, aware, as though she knew someone would one day find her. The coordinates led Elena beyond the last railway line into a silence where even satellites lost signal. Her guide, a retired geologist, said nothing during the 2-day drive. Snow covered the remains of old transmission towers and fuel depots, ghosts of an empire that never admitted defeat. At night, inside the truck, Elena studied Irina's notes, phrases in code, sketches of hexagonal structures, and a single line underlined twice. Memory survives in pattern. She began to wonder if the discovery was less about what the Soviets found, and more about what they feared remembering. They reached Omsk's abandoned Sector 7 at dawn, a maze of concrete half buried in frost. The blast doors were fused shut, but inside, the air still carried a metallic tang. Equipment lay rusted in place, monitors shattered, yet strangely arranged. As if someone had tried to preserve a ritual, in a corner of the command room, Elena found a real canister labeled Project Echo. When she held it to the light, the film's negative revealed a map, not of the tundra, but of nerve pathways. Human, scaled to kilometers. The connection struck her. The artifact hadn't been studying Earth. It had been studying them. Elena set up a portable viewer powered by a field generator. The footage was silent. Grainy images of scientists around the artifact's glowing sphere. Then a new frame appeared. Irina alone, placing her hand on the core, whispering words lost to time. The image fractured into lines, then reformed into coordinates, different from those she had followed. It pointed further north, beneath unbroken ice. In that moment, Elena understood why the project vanished, not to hide failure, but to prevent anyone from completing it. At sunrise, Elena stood on a ridge overlooking the endless ice. Her radio crackled with background static, faint but rhythmic. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. The same signal that once called the Soviet convoys still pulsed across decades. She set her recorder down and let the signal play, knowing she could never publish what she found. The truth was no longer about giants or machines. It was about memory, repeating itself until someone listened. As wind erased her footprints, the tundra seemed to breathe again, carrying both past and present in one continuous wave. Back in Moscow, Elena presented her findings to a private research institute, anonymously funded, its interest hidden behind academic language. They digitized Irina's data reels, converting analog signals into sound spectra. The pulses contained a repeating sequence identical to human DNA base pairs, translated into frequency. The implication was unbearable. The signal had encoded biological memory, not extraterrestrial language. Scientists around the table argued theories of self-organizing life, collective cognition, neural resonance. Elena listened in silence. To her, it sounded less like science and more like remembrance, an echo written into every cell, waiting to be recognized. News of Elena's work spread quietly through scientific circles, drawing interest from organizations she'd never contacted. A letter arrived requesting full access to the reels for collaborative research. The sender had no return address. That night, her office door stood slightly ajar, though she'd locked it. Nothing was stolen. Only her copy of the coordinates was missing. She understood then that the discovery was too valuable, too dangerous. History was about to repeat itself, and she was standing in Irina's shadow. Elena sought counsel from Professor Tomashiva, an ethicist who had once written about scientific responsibility under totalitarian systems. They met in a quiet cafe off Tverskaya Street. Truth is never neutral, Tomashiva said. It always serves someone. Elena asked whether withholding knowledge could be moral. The professor replied, only if sharing it destroys more than it reveals. Outside, snow fell through the glow of traffic lights, and the city hummed with the same pulse she'd once heard through the ice. The choice crystallized within her. Protect the memory, or let the world rewrite it. In her apartment, Elena assembled every note, tape, and image into a single digital archive. Then she encrypted it and sent 2 identical copies to neutral scientific repositories under false authorship, ensuring the knowledge would survive, but stripped of origin or ownership. She erased her own drives afterward. The artifact's coordinates, still encoded in Irina's handwriting, she burned in her sink. As the paper curled into ash, the rhythmic pulse returned faintly from her speakers. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, like a farewell. She let it play until it dissolved into static. Months later, a journal article appeared under no listed author, titled, On Non-Local Biological Memory. Few understood its origin. Fewer still believed it genuine. Elena left Moscow for Novosibirsk University, teaching comparative history of science. Sometimes during evening lectures, she replayed the old recordings, less for data, more for the reminder that knowledge is never lost, only waiting to be found again. Outside her window, the northern lights occasionally flickered, faint and rhythmic. To her, they sounded almost like breath. In a small apartment overlooking the frozen Moskva River, Elena prepared a final message. The world had already moved on. Her article forgotten among thousands of unread studies. She adjusted an old tape recorder, its reels spinning slowly. If you're hearing this, she began, you found what was never meant to be found. Her voice was calm, deliberate. She spoke not of discoveries or data, but of choices. The cost of truth, the weight of silence. Knowledge isn't dangerous, she said. Our fear of it is. Outside, snow drifted against the glass, and the faint hum of the city merged with the static of the machine, a final dialogue between memory and time. As she spoke, fragments of Irina's film flashed across her mind, faces she never knew but somehow remembered. It struck her that each generation inherits unfinished sentences, carrying them forward in hope someone will complete them. The artifact had never been a weapon or a warning. It was continuity, a mirror for the human urge to understand itself. Elena smiled faintly, realizing Irina must have known this too when she left her work behind. Some echoes are not meant to end. They are meant to guide. When the tape reached its end, she rewound it and pressed play. Her own words filled the room, looping with gentle distortion. Through that sound, she layered the faint recording of the signal. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, until both merged into a single rhythm. She titled the tape, The Echo in the Blood, and mailed it to an anonymous university archive. Somewhere it would be cataloged, forgotten, and, someday, rediscovered. She understood then that truth didn't vanish when buried. It simply waited for someone new to listen. Morning came quietly. Elena left her keys on the table and stepped into the pale blue dawn. The city was still half asleep, its streets muffled by snow. She walked toward the river, following the same path Irina had once taken decades earlier on her last day in Moscow. The sun rose through thin cloud, reflected in drifting ice. The tape recorder remained behind, light still blinking. Somewhere far to the north, sensors deep beneath the tundra captured a faint harmonic identical to her voice, proof that every transmission, no matter how small, leaves a trace. Years later, a graduate student cataloging forgotten media would play the tape marked the echo in the blood, her headphones filled with a woman's voice, speaking quietly about truth and memory, then dissolving into rhythmic static. She didn't understand the meaning, but she kept listening, entranced by its calm certainty. Outside the archive window, snow began to fall again. The same slow, deliberate pattern, as if the world itself remembered the signal. The voice faded, but the rhythm remained, and somewhere between silence and sound, history exhaled.